All right, everyone, we're live now. What we are doing here is working on we had a daylight savings time hiccup. So let me just see. I've got Ian here. So this is the fun part about being live. We're going to figure this out in real time. Okay, so events. Well, I'm going to figure this out later. Your event. We're live right now.
All right.
We're live. Let's do this. Okay. Wow. Ian, thank you for handling the time change math. This is one more. It goes to show you that daylight savings time affects us in more ways that we like to agree with.
Well, you know, I never talk politics, and I don't know that daylight savings time is a political issue, but I'm all for getting rid of it. You know, we both were in Vegas this week, and between daylight savings time and then a 3-hour time swap from Tampa to Vegas. I truly, for the first 2 days, couldn't figure out, should I be awake? Should I be asleep? Is it breakfast? Is it dinner? I was all over the place.
What I find really complicated is that why is it that I can go like the rest of the year and I can do 2 hours, 3 hours time changes pretty reliably, but daylight savings time for some reason is just like a total mess up. So I don't know. I can't figure it out. All right, everyone. Well, joining me today is Ian Bingham. Ian and I have been chatting for quite some time now, and how I got first in touch with Ian is Ian wrote a great article probably a year and a half ago on centralization, and I kind of poked him and met up with you first at RecCon. Oh no, at Optech, and one of the things there we chatted, we had a chance to get along really well, and including a few friendly bets and friendly wagers on national hockey teams, and including a few jibes on tariffs that are unavoidable conversations these days. So one of the things we talk about in Getting Hell Yes, and so again, Ian, thanks for coming on, is talking about the buyer's journey. And a lot of folks have talked to me about, since we started this show around, it's great that you're talking about tech and all these things, but can you get in people that are in the business, right? Because there's certainly ample room for conversation, especially those that have to sell to kind of both sides, like both, you're bringing in residents and also bringing in obviously owners and new clients, and that sort of that chemistry within our business. And so excited to have Ian come on and share his role and what he's been working on, and definitely, in the conversations that Ian and I have had, there's definitely evidence of success in taking a Getting Hell Yes approach to bringing on clients and being different and how you differentiate. And so, for everyone listening here, what we'll kind of focus on the conversation is really around a little bit about how Ian's company, Buckingham, differentiates themselves, how you guys find your buyers, what they're looking to solve for, how they find you, and then land on some feedback for everybody, or the advice people can take when they're in this space. So again, thanks for joining me today, Ian. Appreciate you your patience with the daylight savings time mess up. We're gonna get that all figured out, and then a little bit about yourself, how you got in this role, and then what's the problem that you solve or Buckingham solves.
Yeah, no, I'll try to make the intro brief. As I do more public speaking and panels, etc., and they say give an intro, I realize that I'm on the latter side of almost 3 decades in the business, which is mind blowing to me. So when I give that intro, it goes a little long, but I have been in the industry for 26 years now. Started with an owner-operator manager, Village Green, and spent 17 years of my career there. So I can certainly say I grew up there, learned a lot of valuable lessons. And so for the first half of my career, I was actually in operations, which I think, really gives me some unique perspective and kind of is a value add to everything I do, because I started on site. I know what that grind looks like, and worked my way up to, the oversight of a 5-state portfolio, Midwest and East Coast, in my time in operations, and kind of a natural maturation, because I was in ops and I was the forward face on the operations side to a lot of the clients, a lot of institutional large family office groups. an opportunity came around in like 2013 timeframe, where the firm I was with needed someone to continue to grow the third party business. And between the gift of gab and the relationships kind of already in pocket, I moved into that role. And since then, I've done that for a few different companies, CF Real Estate Services and RPM Living, and I've been at Buckingham now for about a year and a half, and continue to do that here.
Right on. And then, for everyone's who listening that might not be dead clear on the role of a third party manager, what's the problem the third party manager? And actually, this might lead to part of the conversation because I think it's changing a little bit. So maybe if you could talk about how you guys, the problem you solve, and if it makes sense how you guys are different, because they're not all the same, and there's definitely room for discussion on why it's competitive.
Yeah, no, and it is competitive, and they're not all the same. But I think, when you say what's the problem we solve, there's a lot of owners, and rightfully so. They want to concentrate and kind of stay in the lane of ownership and asset management. So, property management, I think, is probably one of the hardest jobs out there. We're on the front lines. You look at the different commercial food groups within commercial real estate, and retail, and most of them are pretty easy. Even hotel, you can get an angry guest, but they're usually gone in a few nights. If we get an angry resident, they're locked in for months, if not years, right? And so, take a 250 unit property. At a minimum, you're probably talking 500 to 750 different personalities that you're going to interact with on a reoccurring basis. And so, multifamily is complex, and it's got, I think, the most forward-facing interactions of all the different groups out there in commercial real estate. And so, what we're solving for is to have the best experience, kind of in three different buckets. And the first one is that resident experience, and making sure that they love where they live, and that we're meeting or exceeding their expectations in every facet. And we can go down the rabbit holes of what that means, but it's not just the apartment that they're in. It's the community that they're in. It's all the things that come with that, the amenities that they're promised, and forward-thinking amenities we might offer moving forward, and all those things. And then the next client, if you will, is the owners of the properties, and we look at that, and this is where we're a bit different, somewhat agnostically. So whether it's the funds that we manage, so you go, well, Buckingham owns properties. We do. Our CEO certainly has some individually owned assets, but we also have three different funds, and so those have multiple investors in those funds. And so, while that might not be true third party, we're certainly meeting the expectations of people who are not in our internal umbrella. And then we have true third party, where we're working for ownership groups that don't want to be in the management day-to-day grind, and so they seek us out, or I seek them out, and convince them why we're a difference maker, and we manage for them. So I think the last bucket that sometimes gets missed, but is probably one of the most important, is our employees. And in a ever-changing employment landscape, we talk about centralization. I think the job market as a whole, regardless of industry, changed after COVID. The employee expectation, the employer expectation, we're seeing it now. If you watch anything Wall Street related, and kind of the return to office, and that push, and while I think our folks really never had the luxury, they were certainly frontline throughout the pandemic. We're experiencing that in our residents, and how we have to interact with them because they're having to return to work. Yeah. And so that has changed some of the dynamic and the desire as well. So it's a lot. It's a lot, and where I think Buckingham is making a difference is in our approach. There's a lot of management companies that you look at that NMHC list, and they're I think everyone in the top 10 is probably north of 75,000 units. And look, that's a lot to manage. That's a lot to oversee. And we have a roadmap to growth, but we're pragmatic in the way we grow. We're going to look to clients that think the way we do. We're going to look to clients that geographically are aligned with us. And so, in the last 2 years, we've actually turned down more business than we've taken on, and we've had some great growth. But we really want to make sure that the promises made are the promises kept as it relates to performance. And the way to do that is to really vet the owner and let them vet us and have a much more hands-on approach to where our regionals are only going to oversee 5 or 6 assets as opposed to 10 to 12 like some of our competitors do, and really just get into the details and manage it as if it were our own.
It's interesting because there is the real estate being the adage of location. I mean, it really kind of peels back into everything that people do. And when you're looking to grow in a region, it's complicated because you can really, the benefits of having the network, the people, the notoriety, the reputation in a network can help you really, dig deep within that region. And so when I talk to third parties, I find it really interesting, the different strategies, because there are a lot of different ways to actually go at third party. And the way you described it, especially having a scenario where you have the owners and the funds in the mix of your operations, right? Do you guys have different? How do I phrase this? Better put, some companies have different organizations altogether for their own properties than for their third party managed properties. How does it work at Buckingham?
Yeah, no, look, we don't have those silos. So we're a truly vertically integrated company. I know that on this side of the fence, it's a buzzword. But we do have internalized asset management. We have ground up construction that does not just our assets, but other folks too. So if you had a property that you were trying to put a shovel in the ground, we would bid that like any other GC and be able to build that for you or for our own accounts. Same with our construction services group. They're doing less than 3-day occupied renovations. And the benefit to that is we tested it on our properties and we've perfected it for others. And so we're kind of leveraging the learning curve on our owned assets and then going out to our third party clients and having a really refined service. So our regionals, our vice presidents, our support teams, they oversee the assets in the same groupings, if you will. So there's no owned portfolio and managed portfolio. Those groups are commingled. I think that's the benefit of everyone because there is no different viewpoint or vantage point. We're going to manage them the same way as if we owned them.
Well, I mean, you can be authentic around your statement around that we treat these assets as though they were our own because we do treat them as we do our own.
Yeah. There's really no differentiation. The only differentiation is that on the third party stuff, some people might see it as a value add. I don't know if everyone would, but you get me too, right? So on the third party stuff, I have constant involvement. Whereas as on the own stuff, if it's something that I might have knowledge to, I can ask occasionally, but I'm not involved.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get to do too much vetting of the ownership in that conversation. So what I think is exciting about the market is that, this is there's a bit of, in your business, the third party side of things. So actually in your business, in your role, do you principally seek out, are you looking for, what kind of opportunities do you look for in the market with respect to those different categories of third party or owned or new builds? What do you principally focus on?
Yeah. So, as a company, I think our sweet spot really lies in Class A new lease up, which we've done a ton of. We're a 40-year-old company. The company started doing, value add, older vintage product. We still do a lot of that. And so I would say, in the B space or the aspiring B, so C with a true roadmap to get to B. So that heavy value add, we do a ton of that. And then we do a ton of Class A lease up and Class A management. But, again, I think for a company our size, we punch pretty big. We do have a student housing division.
Oh
We
yeah.
do have an affordable compliance division. So that's stuff that we can do as well. And I think for me, once we break it into which bucket does it land in, it's geography to make sure that we can properly support it. And it's that ownership relationship and making sure that, it's a attainable and sustainable business plan.
Yeah.
Which, I think if we look at the cycles kind of late in the last cycle, things got frothy. And so we're helping owners kind of get those things back on track.
Yeah.
You start buying value add deals at 3.5 caps, things get sticky real quick.
Yeah. No.
And so we're trying to get the world back to right as much as we can influence it.
Do you find the role of a third party is, I just don't want to give I don't want to lead the answer here, but like, do you find the role of third party is changing, and how?
Well, the expectation is changing.
Okay.
I think the onus and the onus to performance is ramped up more than it ever has been. The old saying of a high tide floats all boats has been very true. The tide's out right now. And so management companies that were very good babysitters are really feeling the pressure now. And companies like ours that is very granular and always has been, we're growing because with that tide being out, that additional set of eyes, that hands-on approach is so much more in focus. So there's not as much of well, we've done business with this group forever, so we'll just hand them the next deal and the next deal. I think asset managers are being much more prudent and saying, okay, who's best in market, and what can we get the most performance out of, as opposed to kind of the no bid awards that used to go around, because we're in the spotlight.
Like it feels like and I wasn't in the industry then, but it feels like when I talked to folks like 7 years ago, it must have felt like order taking. Like people were just like, please take my business. It didn't matter what you were charging, right? Whatever, right? Whereas now it's like you have to actually go out there and battle and win.
Yeah, look, the phone, there was a lot more inbound than outbound as far as, because, I think third party business grows more, it just does more accretively when transaction volume is high.
Yeah.
Brokers are typically going to tell you a story about how performance can be increased with the right property manager. And so time of sale or acquisition is always a great time to consider a change. If we look in the rearview mirror, development was at an all-time high, and that is, the deliveries have actually been still pretty peaked, and that's now going to start falling off as permitting is dried up. But yeah, when that was happening, there was a lot of just, we need a property manager and who's a go-to and let's get it done. Now, because all of those things have slowed down, I think there's become a more pragmatic approach within asset management of ownership firms and family offices to say, hey, look, let's take our time pulling the trigger, because we're in essence, married to these folks for 5 to 7 years at least, in a business relationship that is hard to break up from once you're in it. And so let's make sure we pick the right folks. And not to say that wasn't the approach before, but most owners were taking 10-year debt and were selling in 2 to 3 years because they were getting unsolicited offers at, a 3x return on capital. And so why wouldn't you sell? Right. And so those days are gone, and you just have to really sharpen the pencil. And I think that's been to our benefit.
Like, I think like the people that I'll say you included, that I've been talking to a third party, like it's interesting how the leaders of third party are starting to seek innovation. And I'll say again, like I've only been in this industry for like 12 months, right? But when I first came in 12 months ago to like this last week, I'm starting to see a much greater, whereas maybe before there was like a curiosity around innovation. And like you wrote your article about centralization 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
putting your thoughts out there about how things might need to change. And then, so a curiosity around or awareness around innovation or doing things differently, to like getting kind of lukewarm about it, maybe getting toes in the water, experimenting a little bit, now actively seeking out innovation in order to kind of like differentiate, or, I mean, obviously I'll ask, given the relationship of a fee manager and an owner, what's the motivation behind a fee manager to be innovative?
I guess it depends on the goal of the individual asset, and by the way, every owner has a different goal too, right? And so, on the fee manager side, it's marketability, but it goes back to those different groups that I talked about, right? And when you're vetting proactive solutions in the tech space, is it going to give more time back to our employees and what we're doing? And if it is, are they going to then in turn able to utilize that to grow rents or refine the resident experience, and make those things better? And both those, as you vet those, should have a correlating ROI. And some of that is very clear and obvious, and some of it, is a little more convoluted in terms of ROI. I was on a podcast a few days ago with Andrew from Leaselock, and we were talking about kind of this exact topic, and what I find interesting, because I've been in the industry for a while, we talked about centralization and the assistant managers going to more of a corporate bookkeeping role. Well, when I came into the industry in the late 90s, that's what it was. It was a corporate bookkeeping role. And so part of this is a bit of a back to the future. Now, what's changed is the introduction of technology to make that far more efficient and I don't want to say easier, but I think efficient is probably the best word. But there's so much out there to vet now. We talk about AI, and AI is not just a bot that people get convinced is a real person. But AI touches everything. It's touching how we do our service orders, right? And the ability to make those quicker, faster, easier, not to plug your product, but something to where our service teams can now proactively, view the issue with the resident and make sure that they have the correct parts, or they can troubleshoot before they get out there, or ideally the resident can do a quick fix without our service technicians having to even go onto the property. And so, again, as we look at things, I think efficiency becomes the buzzword for everyone, because efficiency relates to ROI, it relates to better customer service, time back to our people. And so I think those are pretty undeniable as it relates to what an owner wants to see, right? If I tell an owner I can be more efficient and then tell them all the reasons that benefits, that's undeniable. Now it's when you can't check those boxes that you go, is this the right solution for us? But we talk about centralized maintenance. Well, malls and commercial office, they've been doing that for decades. I don't know about you Canucks up there, but here in the States, we see the red and black lettering on JLL white vans, and I've seen those for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right. Like they've been doing that as a matter of business from day one. And we're like, we're going to innovate. Well, kind of, but other industries have been doing that for a very long time. We're going to figure out how to take technology and make that applicable to what we do. But some of these are not new ideas. They're just, we're trying to make them better.
I appreciate the point on efficiency. Like I have, you walk into an industry with cold eyes, and from a high performing, or I'll say extremely cost constrained industry. And my first perception was that, okay, these are, and I think that and I'll actually give credit to multifamily that they get a really bad reputation for being laggards. And I'll explain. So why I defend them now than when I first came in is because my perception of technology has shifted. And again, like this is I'm a tried and true technologist, from technology for technology's sake, for or problems that seek out technology, right? And in my view, multifamily didn't have a problem to solve. And so if you don't have a problem to solve with respect to efficiency, because the rising tide was there for so long,
Yep.
then there's a lot of risk in trying to activate technology where you don't have the necessary why behind it. And so when people say it openly now, and they even talked about it at the conference this week, I say I think I choose to defend the reality of it was not a priority. And so I would rather honor the decisions that were made to reflect the priorities at the time rather than look back and cast stones. And then as well, the reason why we all have an opportunity in the technology space today, and even in the management in the third party space, is because those things that were not priorities are now priorities now. And like anything, it's difficult to make money in the market when it consistently goes up, but you can make a lot of money when it's going like this. And right now we're in an up and down world. And so I seek to, the parallels of my previous kind of like core focus for industry start to really emerge. And so I was in heavy asset, heavy industry, and we relied exclusively on the service companies to bring innovation to the asset owners. Asset owners were not in the innovation business for operations. They were in the acquisition, they're in the mining, they're in the banking, they're all sorts of different businesses, but they were not in the asset optimization business. And so we consequently had huge partners. So the biggest, like Halliburton, as an example, is a service organization that its job is to bring innovation, right? And imagine the different places where that occurs. And so, like, I find it, so using that lens, I'm hopeful and optimistic. And again, I'll lean on conversations I've had with you and a bunch of other leaders and other third parties that we're going to start seeing a curve of innovation for efficiency's sake driven by the third parties. Now, the question I have about, to close that out is the challenge that third parties have that's unique to, different from my previous industry experience is that you have so many owners.
Yeah.
And so how do you bring, because you're changing an operating model or innovating on an operating model, you're phasing in an operating model. How do you bring the different owners on side when you're talking about something like centralization? Because that's not like your contracts stipulate that someone needs to be, you're going to be billed for someone sitting in a chair. Now I'm going to take that person out of the chair and I'm going to allocate you based on something.
Yep. Well, and it goes back to that vetting of interest alignment, and it's a conversation we're having up front, saying, "Hey, look, Buckingham actually centralized maintenance before it did office, and we're certainly in both now. But we took the leap initially on figuring out how to pod properties on the service side, and that's I think harder because it requires stronger geographical footprints."
Mm-hmm.
You really have to, and this equates to both sides of the house, but make sure that it's like product. Because you can have either on the service or leasing side someone who's fantastic in that 1980s vintage value add deal, but they may struggle or not do as well on that Class A new lease up, and vice versa. Taking that sales driven individual who's got the shiniest new penny and saying, okay, go lease at this 40-year-old property, and that makes me feel old when I call an 80s vintage deal 40. But it's different, right? And
Yeah.
so there's a lot that goes into that thought and making sure that those are applicable back and forth. And by the way, whether it's owned or third party, sometimes the centralized model is not going to work. If you have a large unit property or a property that's just got some, I don't want to say insurmountable struggles, but some, so maybe it's a 700 unit deal that's got a comprehensive value add going on. You're not going to want to share those teams with anyone because they've got so much going on that the focus has to stay there and it can't be divided in any way, shape, or form. So, to that end, there has to be interest alignment. There also has to be the realization that there isn't a one size fits all approach as we enter this new world of centralization. Now, what can work everywhere? That's some of this AI-driven technology. It's stuff like you're doing that really, has no product type restriction or no geographical boundary. And so, we're always looking at those because those universal fits are kind of the easiest justifier. But, on the third party side, I think one of the things that's hardest for us is anytime we want to adopt something new, a supplier or vendor sells it to us, and then we need to go sell it to our owners and clients.
Yeah.
Right. So, you talk about like that sales cycle, and I've got a lot of friends on the vendor and supplier side, and some of them will share with me like their expectations of cycle, and I'm like, ooh, no, like,
higher. Your price is right. Higher.
yeah. Well, that's it. Like, oh yeah, we're looking for a 60-day cycle, and I'm like, did you say 6 months?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, like there's just a lot more. It's not red tape, but there's just a lot more buy-in that's needed.
Well, you've got to corral. If we can corral, if as a vendor I'm selling to Buckingham, I've got to corral your stakeholders internally, and then your stakeholders got to corral more stakeholders. Like, it's like there's a factorial there of complexity in the sales deal, and not to mention I'm not in the room when you're pitching it to your owners.
That's right. I mean, sometimes if I don't think I can do a good enough job, then I'm going to say we want to introduce you to someone that we're considering.
Gotcha.
But yeah, to your point, like for groups like yours, you're probably selling it 3 times to a management company, right? You're going to get that initial point of contact. They may have other stakeholders that are going to want to have a say and a buy-in. And then you might have to do that all over again with an ownership group to get to the finish line. So, I think double-edged sword. It's going to be well vetted by the time it rolls out.
Sure.
But the flip side to that is it could slow the process in a world that I've always said, as we innovate, if you're not doing something new and your roadmap doesn't have kind of 6-month thresholds, you're probably going to fall behind. Because it is evolving so quick. And, we talk about the AI learning and all those things, but that affects everything we're doing as it relates to the tech space. Because we look at 10 years ago and compared to today, and I would say that probably 60% of processes that have had technology involved, I probably could not have forecasted. Like, it has moved so much faster than I thought it would. Both via the appetite and the need, and for all the things that COVID did that sucked, the one thing it did is it catapulted us on a lot of the technology because we had to.
I mean, and for everyone to be aware, like, of course, there's a lot of talk about how like AI and specifically Gen AI is changing the productivity of the individual person, the IC. But what's interesting, you think about it, if you really kind of want to take a look into the murky future, the fact that people that are on the front end lead of that, the people that are coding with AI. So if you thought things were fast before, right? Like now, like you can create code, quality assured code in minutes that used to take months.
Yep.
Right. So those that are leading the change are going to be able to create even more change faster. So it's like, it's at the end of a whip, and it's going to be really interesting to see it. I mean, and my job is to think like 2 years ahead. And I really, the probability of what I can think of, what it's going to be available in 2 years, just given what we delivered in 2025 or 2024, like even January 2024, I could not have imagined what we delivered in 2020 by December 2024 as a tech team, because we started adopting Gen AI every single day. And so the stuff that we deliver is different. Now, I think what's interesting, what you talked about around like the complexity of the sales cycle, I think what makes the opportunity for those that are willing to dig in is becoming appreciating the kind of like the 2-stage pull for be able to sell something. And so, I signed up for Brad Hargraves' sales course because I felt I had some gaps in terms of the conversation I was having with folks like yourself and others, in terms of the change that we're trying to, impart. And, there were gaps because there were things that I hadn't thought of in terms of how we're presenting the value proposition and who ultimately has a vote to make the change happen. And so, even today, I'm putting together 2 proposals today, and both of them, I'm re-engineering them to have a greater reflection of the stakeholders, the multi-stage stakeholders that are involved. I mean, everybody would tell me, a month ago, well, you should just sell the owner operators because they're the only ones that can make a decision. And truthfully, it's because I imagine that the sales pitch for many people is only governed to a single audience rather than considering the full life cycle of who has to be involved in decision.
Well, and I understand the propensity to say just go to the owner operators because it's the easier lift, and that's not a false statement. That's
Yeah.
true. But that would preclude you from several million units of business.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like 95% of the market.
Yeah. So, as smart as that is, it's probably a little short-sighted. But yeah, probably the easier lift. What I think the other thing that I've seen over the years, kind of twofold. So the REITs will see something cool and they'll say, cool, we'll build it ourselves, because they have the resources to do that. And then on the other side of that, and this is very much third-party operators doing this as well. You'll have their boards or their owners investing in technology, kind of pari passu with owners, right? And so we're seeing that a lot. Without naming names, I think there was 3 or 4 major capital groups there that all they did was take in emerging technology, and it's all funded by ownership groups, third party and owned. So the desire is there, and I think the C-suites that are making those decisions see the opportunity in it because they're willing literally to put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
So no, I think you got to hit both sides, but yeah, look, the managed side is harder for sure.
When you guys are out there on a biz dev side of things, how do you filter on prospects? Like, you got 100 prospects to choose from, and how are you going to filter on the 10 that you have time for?
It's geography, it's reputation, it's likelihood, and some of that comes with being in the industry a long time and knowing who to call and who not to call. There's going to be behind the veil things where an owner has multiple joint venture deals with that management company. So am I going to be able to break in and peel those away? Probably not when they have tens or hundreds of $1 million of co-invested product that may be unrelated to the deals I'm going after, but it's still a relationship hurdle that might be insurmountable. We talk about vetting the owner. At Buckingham, our reputation matters a lot to us. Brad Chambers founded our company 41 years ago, and wants to continue to remain, one of the highest respected firms out there. And so, making sure that the groups we manage for hold their own reputation in the highest esteem as well, and that's my job to vet that and ask the hard questions about the investment strategy of the property to make sure that it'll be executed. We saw a lot in this last cycle where there was these grandiose plans of value add, and then they didn't get executed. And no one goes, well, who was the owner on that deal that didn't execute? Because this place stinks. They go, oh, so-and-so management company really screwed us. They promised us the world and didn't deliver. And so, we really try to vet those things. And then it comes down to what we were just talking about, and, the open-mindedness of the owner. They don't have to adopt everything we do. There's some lines in the sand though too. We don't want to be running 2 or 3 different IT departments to support a myriad of systems. We'll definitely do some plugins that are one-off if an owner is passionate about it and they don't add exponential amounts of work. But at the same time, there's some mainstays where we want to have consistency because that's how everyone's going to best operate.
Right. But it does, there are some natural constraints around, like you said, the infrastructure. Like, it's unlikely that a large third-party manager is going to have one tech stack.
Yeah, no, and I don't want to speak too far out of school, but I know several of the what I would call very large firms.
Mhm.
They're supporting at least two, if not three,
Yeah.
um, of
Yeah.
the like PMS tech stacks. And then, one of the things that I talked about this week with several people at RetCon is as you vet out solutions, and actually I moderated a panel and this came up too. Using plugins and software that is not proprietary, I
Mhm.
think is extremely important. And or maybe I shouldn't say not proprietary, that has the ability to have an open API and can integrate with your systems. And I don't care if you're on RealPage, Yardi, Entrada, what that is less that I don't want to say inconsequential, but does that company have that integration? Because I'll
Mhm.
tell you right now, if I may see something and I go, man, this would be really cool, and I'll take it back to our team. The first question they're going to tell me is it integrated with our current PMS?
Yeah.
And if it's not, and they say, oh, it's on our roadmap, cool. Get back to me when it's not a roadmap and it's an actuality.
Yeah.
Um, because we're from a resource standpoint, we can't be that bridge.
Yeah.
It has to work.
It was an interesting conversation at RetCon, that exact topic, right? There's a chicken and egg that emerges in that we can't get AP as technology providers, we can't get API access without a customer sponsoring the connection, right? So like we can't get access to your PMS software vendor unless we get permission from you. And so that kind of like creates this, well, then now as a vendor, I need to pick a horse because I can't support, it'd be a waste of money to go build integrations with all 5 PMSs and then figure out which one wins. So then you end up kind of in this like scenario where you've got to go pick the PMSs. Now, what's interesting is the PMSs also often land within like certain categories of types of buyers. And so like there are a Appfolio type. There is a Yardi. Well, Yardi's vertically everybody, but like, there is an Entrada type. They specialize in certain spaces. So there's a bit of help there.
One's great at affordable, one's great at student, one's great at commercial. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. And by the way, you would know this far better than I would, but I certainly hear it from our side. They all have very different price structures for you as a supplier to go in and create those. And so, sometimes from a cost prohibitive nature, you pick a pony and then you get kind of pigeonholed into a product type as a result.
Yeah. And I'm like religiously against the charge for APIs on a entryway perspective, because I just think it's bad business. I mean, it affects me, but if I look at the most open and most successful app store in the world, it's the Apple iOS store or the Google Play Store. And you pay on transaction on success rate. You don't pay for access. And I just find it like, and again, part of my whole philosophy is build bridges, not moats. And moating up is going to carve out innovation. And so I've already talked to a number of people who are seeking to leave their, or at least cut scope on their existing PMSs because they don't integrate with the system of engagements that they want to use. And there's like there's thinking around like goes back probably 10 years ago. Gartner came out with this model called the bimodal operating model. And it's very straightforward. I'll put it in simple terms, is that fast and slow has to coexist for successful innovation. And the best example I can give you is that the roots of a tree should not be moving, and the leaves of a tree should always be moving, right? And you cannot have roots that move and a tree that's that's healthy and vibrant. It just doesn't work that way. And so systems of record, like some of the systems of record we all know, need to be stable and slow. And it's unnatural for them to be expected to move at the speed of innovation. It's against the laws of nature. And so, but we're in a world now where the end users are demanding, the residents are demanding, everybody is demanding speed and innovation. And it's thrust upon this, do you integrate with XYZ? And if the cost of entering that market or answering that question is like a month of development or, plus the development, then you're going to just avoid that market. And so people end up losing. It's like tariffs. It's a fucking tariff.
Yeah,
It's like tariffs, right? Because the person ends up losing is it creates a multiple loss scenario. So that's why I'm religiously against it, not because I'm being asked to pay it. I'm just like, this is bad business for you, not just for me and for the customer, for everyone else.
Well, and the tariff and the moat analogy both hold true because 9 times out of 10, if someone's being asked to pay a large fee for an integration, it's not like you're going to say, well, I'll just sacrifice all profitability to do that. You're going to pass it through.
Yeah.
So if I'm passionate about wanting to roll out something that I've been sold, but there's this tertiary hurdle, right? And not just monetary. I've had scenarios with software engagements, call it one of the plugins that we thought was pretty great. And like, oh, your lead time for an activation on site is 45 to 60 days. I'm like, and I'm trying to be very nondescript here, in an environment that the typical expectation would be 14, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, all your competitors can get this done in 2 weeks, and you want me to wait 2 months. I can't go without it for 2 months. It's gonna affect advertising and our ability to lease. Like, no, that's not gonna work.
It doesn't work.
And so, yeah, to your point, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that moat philosophy was profitable and it worked really well. As we continue to evolve more and more rapidly, I would think that that's probably going to need a real long, hard look to stay competitive.
Well, and that's not their core business. Like,
No.
Charging for things that are blocking people from coming in. Like, if you innovate with one of those, and there's a greater likelihood that you're going to bring in more license fees than the revenue that you're paying them for the integration. But it's not going to get you. That's like an way to hell yes. So when you go out there and you're in the market, I'll try and get to close up the last few questions here.
Yeah.
Do folks have like a time wall? Like, do they have to make a choice by a certain time typically?
So with property management, yes and no. So the yes would be at that acquisition or development time frame, right? So a development timeline, I mean, when you start to dream it up to when you're getting residents is years typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're depending on the product type, the location, and I say the location, the municipality, and their perceived hurdles of development. But 18 to 36 months could be the timeline, right? Depending, high rise, mid rise, BTR, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
As a management company, and I think this is a universal statement, the earlier we can be involved, the better. You've got, typically decades of experience in lease up, and those people want to kind of have their say and not just say that they got to put their feather in the cap, but probably have value to add to that process. So that one, the earlier the better. Acquisition, you typically get the call somewhere between the 60 to 90 day mark. Say we're in the best and final to buy this property.
Mm-hmm.
We would love your insights on the pro forma, on the sub market, and all those things. And then you're going to probably do a formal pitch to the deal. And then ideally at that kind of 45 day mark, 60 to 45 day mark, you're doing a due diligence for that client and getting the property management agreement signed. And then you're kind of 30 days out from there. So very defined timelines in the acquisition side.
Mm-hmm.
On the development side, they're further out. Now, where's the one where there's no real timeline? And that's, I would say, an underperforming asset where an owner is looking to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that usually has a higher sense of urgency, because if they're at the point where they're willing to make a change is tough, right? I mean, you're unplugging systems, you're plugging in new systems, people may come and go. It's not easy. And so that's not a decision that's taken lightly. And once you get to that point, that usually moves pretty quick too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of behind the scenes, because an outgoing management company by the letter of most management agreements, is going to get a 30-day notice. Sometimes there's a 30-day notice to cure before that, but that's going to move pretty quick too, because what you don't want is disenfranchised employees, sitting there, not necessarily being productive, waiting for the next management company to come in. And so, that can move pretty quick too, although the behind the scenes action could be, a longer maturation.
Wouldn't that complicate new ideas and innovation as well? Like the fact that they can give you 30 days notice, like as a management company, you've got to be pretty damn sure this is going to be, or at least have mutual conviction with the ownership group that will what do you call it? Have a steer co in place that's mutually held between the ownership and the fee manager and the innovation, so that you can get a tight feedback loop or a wrangle on the situation, so it doesn't impact the overall contract agreement.
Yeah, well said. And the other thing, and you probably don't like to hear this, but it's the reason why all the properties typically enter in to the agreement individually with 30-day cancellation notices, because most contracts ideally are going to match what we're held to as a management company. So signing those multi-year agreements typically don't take place because there's this stability isn't there on the management company side to obligate anyone to those.
Yeah. And so one more complication, right? One more paper, one more lawyer, one more everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's 100% correct. So the hurdles are there. What I will say is, especially with ownership groups that are larger or more complex, once they're aware of something, and so maybe they are using Greystar and they have heard of that particular solution before, and they're using it elsewhere. Well, then it becomes real easy, because then I go, hey, we want to roll out X, Y, Z, and they're like, oh yeah, we use that at 50 of our other properties and other geographies. Go for it.
Yeah.
So sometimes that heavy lift has already been done, and there's no sales process on that call it that secondary loop. It's an email back and forth in a day, and it's done. So there is an ideal case.
Ideally you get to the point that you're part of the win and part of the original contract, right? You're part of the differentiator for that third party. Hey, we do this way because it's a better sauce, and that's part of the agreement, right?
Yep.
You've been in this business for a while, and you got a lot of people that you've worked for and worked for you. What's the piece of advice you give them when they're looking to try and, also put it this way, when they're stuck in a sales rut, what's the piece of advice you can give them to help them get to hell yes customers?
It's a fantastic question. Conviction and perseverance. Be able to stand behind what you're talking about and what you're selling, and understand that there's no and not today. It goes back to that sales cycle conversation. I think so many people get dejected because they can't close in 30 or 60 days. And it's don't be afraid to have honest conversations. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know Tara Samuels, but I do some mentoring for her networking group. And there's actually a young man that she assigned me, and we didn't even realize it, but this young man and my son went to college together. Oh, yeah. So I instantly kind of had a kinship. They literally graduated the same year, and I'm like, all right, cool. Yeah, I'd love to mentor this guy. And I've shared that with him too. I was like, look, you're in your mid-20s, you're hungry. That's awesome. Keep that passion. But if someone says no, ask them why. Don't just go, okay, and move on to the next one on your list. Say, is it something a product can do better for you? Is there a reason that we're just not the ones for you? Or is this timing, and can I reach back out to you? And I think, and this is a different slippery slope as we wrap up, but there's been a lot of generations that have stacked on top of each other, right? We look at the baby boomers, and that was like a 30 some odd year window of generation. And then we look at, like I'm Gen X. We were a fairly short window. Mm-hmm. And then come after millennials. I think there's been 3 named generations after millennials.
Yeah.
right? And
Well, it used to be just kids these days.
Yeah, no. But 2007 is when iPhones came out, and that changed everything, right? And yes, you had Blackberries before that, which I would say was smartphone infancy, but it made people afraid to pick up the phone and talk to each other, and made it way more easier to hide behind the ambiguity of a text or an email. And it's very easy to reject someone on email. And not to say that you need face-to-face rejection, but don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to say, can I go to breakfast or lunch or dinner with you and discuss this, so that you can learn from the rejection. The other thing I would say is an old Army adage that I have, and that's mission first, people always. And understand how important it is to have the buy-in of the people that you work with and for, to achieve the common goal. Because if you leave them out of the loop or behind, you're going to struggle to be successful.
Well, that's good. That's good sage advice. We'll capture that one. Who should we talk to next on the show?
Say again?
Who should we have on the show next?
Ooh. Have you done Joe Summers yet?
Not done Joe Summers yet. We'll get Joe Summers. Where's he at?
He's out of DC. He's been a part of a lot of different companies. I'm going to tell you to go to his LinkedIn so that I don't misquote him, but sure. He's affiliated with Gatewise and Connects and Fetch, and he's
everybody
with me. Yeah, he's been a founder or fractional founder of a lot of groups that touch our industry. So great guy to know and talk to. He's a hockey bum like us.
There you go.
Really went to a Caps Lightning game with him. Lightning won, of course, a few weeks ago. Yeah, he'd be a great one for you.
All right, excellent. Well, I'll reach out to him. Thanks for the offer there. And everyone else listening today, thank you for listening in. Apologies for the daylight saving times mix up on times, but hopefully you got a chance to connect in. Thank you for the comments throughout. Listen to us on Apple and Spotify. Add your comments, like, subscribe, download, all those good things. Helps everything else out. And thank you, Ian. I really appreciate the time today. In fact, thank you for all the conversations we've had over the last year or so. I really appreciate your input and insights. And it's been a wonderful time today. Thank you.
Cheers. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.